guys, I think I've got it right. It's looking a little bit different today, but we'll see how it goes. My name is Kathleen, and I'm the owner and dyer behind Good Little Yarn Co. And today I'm going to show you a little bit taking behind the scenes on how I actually do my dyeing. The colorway that we're going to be dyeing today is called Meadow. It's, as you can see from over here on the screen, it's kind of greenish, yellowish, tiny little bit of brown in it maybe, but it's very pretty. And I'm going to show you how I do each of the steps. This is a 3-layered dyeing process, and we are going to, like I said, I'm going to show you each of the layers. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read and actually talk at the same time, which is not the best idea for me. So, and we will. As you can see from the pan up here, I believe it's the top left of the screen. I don't know. I get confused because everything's mirrored. That one is blank. It has nothing on it yet. The one right below it has 1 layer. The one that is next to that has 2 layers, and this one up here in the top corner has all 3 of the layers. So we are going to be dyeing today. We are going to. And then after we're done with that, I'm going to show you the finished product. I have one of them that I can show you so you can see how it turns out, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes with the way things are wet and I'm dyeing. And I also have a pair of socks, which I made out of this yarn, so we can kind of see it from beginning to end. That's kind of the plan. So we will see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Before I do, I want to thank everybody for being here live, and also for those of you that are watching it later. I am going to have this, if you ever want to reference it for any reason, it is on my Facebook page, which is Good Little Yarn Co. And also, technically I'm saving them on YouTube. It's not really like a YouTube channel. It's just kind of more or less a standard storage, but you can find them there if you really wanted to. All right, I'm going to get started. I have a, just as an FYI, I have a new microphone today. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Kind of in life and kind of in my business and kind of in kind of all of this, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I'm kind of figuring it out as I go along. I've weighed very heavily on the learning how to dye and the learning how to business stuff. I've weighed very, very heavily on other creators, mainly on YouTube. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and do the same thing, because I think it's important that that there are references for people to figure out how they want to do stuff. So this is how we're going to figure out how to do this. I will be switching this over, and I'll go ahead and start dyeing. I think this, the way I have the cameras today, I think you can see a little bit better what it is that I'm doing. You can see all of the pans, but you can also see where I have my dyes and how I'm measuring them out. I do weigh all of my dyes because I want them to be consistent throughout each colorway. So every time I make it, it's you know, there's going to be variances, of course, because it's hand dyed, but it's going to be, you can pretty much count on the fact that you're going to be able to see what it is. Y'all, I cannot speak today. Okay, this first color that I'm doing is a very, very light green, which I'm applying first as the first layer, just to kind of just kind of put a little color down and kind of set the basis for the other colors that I'm going to be adding. You'll be able to see little bits of this, of course, but it's mainly how all of the different layers kind of interact together. So you don't just see, color A, color B, and color C. You kind of see A, B, and C, and then also how A and B work and how A and C work together because they kind of all combine a little bit. So this is a very, very light green. This is one of my favorite greens. I use this a lot. But like I said, it's very light and it very pastel. It's beautiful. But it's also very nice. It's kind of a first layer. Okay. So I'm dyeing today 2 skeins of each of the 4 bases that I use. I have my Everyday Sock, DK Everyday, Sparkly Sock, and Sparkly DK. And all of my bases are 75% superwash merino, and these 2 are 25% nylon, and these 2 are 20% nylon, and then also 5% of the silver stellina, which is what gives it this really fun sparkly look. Okay. All right. The next color that I'm going to add is this second layer right here. You can see I've already kind of rearranged the yarn, but you see this kind of lighter green throughout, and that's what we just applied to the first pan. I hope y'all are having a nice day. It's a little bit cool in North Carolina, but it is sunny and beautiful, so I can't complain. I know the Northeast had snow this week, which is kind of crazy. So luckily we have not had any of that. All right, let's shake this up. This is a very dark green. So just going to kind of add some really cool depth to this colorway. And also one of the things that it does is it kind of separates a little bit. So you get kind of these little areas of brown, which I think are really cool for this colorway. This is part of my my spring bulbs collection, and so I was kind of going for the the meadow before all the flowers bloom with the different shades of the green and little bits of brown. So that was the inspiration for this one. All right, here's that dark green. The first was kind of a yellowy green, and the second one is a little bit more of a bluey green. Here, I don't know if you can see here, but there's little bits of brown, kind of browny yellow that comes out of this one. I think makes it kind of interesting. Let me just check the chat real quick. Oh, hey, Shannon. I'm so glad you could make it. I know. I found the same thing, that finding help with the dyeing was difficult. There's a couple of people who are very helpful and very open with their processes, and some that are not so much. And that's cool. I mean, this is how we're making our living. So personally, I don't find it threatening at all for me to help somebody else, somebody that's just coming along, somebody that's new, somebody that hasn't really done this before. I don't find that threatening in the least. I think that the more we develop a community, the stronger we are. Good morning, Carrie. It's nice to see you. Yeah, green is one of my favorites too. I absolutely love it. But Shannon, if you have any specific questions, you can certainly ask them in the chat, or you can go to my Facebook page and you can DM me or on Instagram. Yeah, exactly. There's room for all of us. Absolutely. And you know what? If you are at home and you are dyeing and you see I want this color specifically, go for it. If you want to make that color, that's just fine. If you'd rather buy it from me, that's fine too. But you know what? I have no problem showing, giving you my, my recipes and the way of doing things. Good morning, Dana. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, I was just saying that that I'm a completely open book as far as the way I dye, how I dye, what I use to dye. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I can't actually see the chat when I'm dyeing, so I'll just come back and check it every now and then. Just as a recap, I have, we're dyeing the colorway called Meadow today. And at the very end, I'll show you how this ends up turning out. But we've applied the first layer, which is a very, very light green color. And this second layer, which we've added a dark, dark green to it. This one down here has the color is completely done. So it's just sitting there and cooking. So we still have one more layer to do. It's what I've chosen to do is do a light green just to kind of get a little color here, add the darker green, which adds a lot of depth. And then I'm doing kind of a wash of a very light yellow that kind of goes all over the top of it and kind of, kind of all plays together and makes it a little bit more spring green and a little bit less evergreen, Christmas green, which is cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and head over and do this third layer. Like I said, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Since I know at least two of you are actually starting to dye, I can go a little bit more into depth in my process if you'd like. I don't want to be too basic and talk down to you, but on the other hand, I don't want to assume that you know everything, because I know when I started, I knew absolutely nothing. So, okay, like I said, this third layer is it's a very light yellow, which I have, I've combined it with a little bit of a very light gray, just so it kind of tones it down just a little bit. Because yellow can be a pretty, pretty in-your-face color. Okay, so this is actually how much dye I'm going to be using. I hope you can see this. It's very, very little dye. But I'm going to dilute it with water just so that I can cover it over everything a little bit better. All right, here. You'll notice that some dyers, what they do is take their skeins and kind of lay them flat like this and kind of, pour over the top. A lot of people actually use large double pans, which is the way they choose to do it. It's the way they get the look that they're going for. But what I like to do is kind of, every time I pull this out to put on a new layer, I kind of readjust this so that different parts are going to be sitting on top. And instead of laying it down, kind of flat, I kind of more or less, kind of plop it down and then kind of pull some of the lighter colors up to the top. I like my my yarn when it's done to be able to be kind of like spread out if that makes any sense. It'll make more sense when I show you the sock that I have dyed. I'm trying to avoid, when you use my yarn in a project, to have like big patches of dark green and very little yellow and very little light green, and then like a huge patch of light green and very little dark green. I think some people call it pooling, which I guess makes sense. And there's certainly a place for that, but it's just not what I'm doing. Alrighty, so I'm gonna add this layer of yellow on top. All right. And once the heat and the acid gets to that, it's going to get a little bit more yellow. Okay. So 3 of the main things that you're going to need to dye are not even just supply-wise, but just so that the chemistry of it works, is you need some type of a protein-based fiber. Oftentimes using superwash merino is one of the easiest ones to start with because it really takes dye really well, and you can kind of develop your colors that way doing that. You also need acid dyes. There are several different brands and different places that you can get them. I generally use Jacquard acid dyes, and I also use Dharma acid dyes. Those are the 2 that I use. So you need the fiber, you need the dye, and you also need a source of acid, because you use mainly water, but your water needs to be acidic in order for the chemical reaction to kind of all work and have the color really absorb into the fibers, so that when you rinse it, all of the color stays there. And you need heat. So the combination of the dyes, the acid, the heat will allow the kind of magic to happen. All right, let me head over here and check the chat. Okay, Data, that is a really good question. And you will see different theories on this. When I first started, I tended to get it really almost like boiling hot. I mean, like rolling, boiling. I have found that it works best if it's hot enough that you can see the steam. So it's, I think you can see in that one right there with the dark green that it's kind of bubbling just a little bit, which which is fine, but I prefer it to not. I like the when it's really boiling like that, all of the yarn is moving, right? I'm not worried about it. It's superwash yarn. I'm not worried about it felting, and it's not the end of the world. But it's not necessary. It makes, I find that it use a little bit more time and not as high of a boiling heat. Seems to work better for me. It seems to, the dyes seem to absorb, the dyes seem to stay in the fibers better if I do that. Like total, I will probably, these will probably be on for about an hour. Usually about after every layer, especially the first 2 layers, I usually let them sit for about 15 minutes or so, and then I start it, start the process again. And then when I have the last layer on, I let that sit usually for another half an hour or so. So some of the dyes are sitting on there for like an hour, sometimes a little bit more. It kind of depends on the strength of the dye itself. But another thing I did want to mention, I told you that I was using the 4 bases I guess I could show my face here, not that it really matters. There we go. Hello, it's me again. The four bases that I'm choosing to use, 2 of them have stellina in it. And one thing that I found, and you'll hear from other people, are kind of I don't want to say controversy because that sounds really dramatic, but as to whether you use citric acid as your acid source or if you use white vinegar as your acid source. Both of those will get your water to the proper acidity. I find personally, for the majority of the time I use citric acid, I find that it's a little bit more consistent. Sometimes with vinegar from bottle to bottle, there's a difference in the acidity. So you just have to adjust, which is fine, that works too. But the one exception that I have to that is when I'm using stellina in my yarn, I'm using the sparkly yarn. If you use citric acid, it kind of dulls the stellina, so it kind of takes away from the whole point of the stellina, which is to have the sparkliness in the yarn. So I do use vinegar only when I'm using the sparkly stellina yarn. Otherwise, I use citric acid for all of that. I put I start this out. I guess I could do it just from the beginning. Maybe next week we'll do that. We start with a pan, and I put about maybe 1.5 inches or so of water, and then I add a tablespoon of citric acid, or in the stellina yarn, I use about 1/2 cup of vinegar. And I do have a pH tester, which you can use. I've just been doing it enough that I know that tablespoon of citric acid brings the water to a good acidity, as does the 1/2 cup of the vinegar. And then I put the yarn in. I let it soak for, sometimes half an hour, sometimes not quite that long. And then I start to heat it up. When I'm doing the variegated yarns like I'm doing, I like the yarn really, really to be ready to go before I put that first layer on it, because I want there to be that variation, those little bits of color. And if the water's nice and hot, if the fiber is nice and hot and ready to take that color, then it tends to, be a little bit more sporadic with where the color goes, as opposed to when you're doing like a semi-solid kind of a color. I don't have the water as hot when I start, because I want the dye to kind of move around and get within, kind of all around the yarn before it starts to settle and attach to that yarn permanently, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm giving a whole lot of information and not making a whole lot of sense. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do one more layer on this top one. Here. But like I said, I have a Facebook group. It's not, I just started it not too long ago, so there's not a whole ton of us in there, but the people that are there are very nice, very cool people. So you can come hang out there or on Instagram, and I'm Good Noodle Yarn Co. in all the places. Instagram, there are definitely more people there. I've been on Instagram longer, but whatever one you use, it really doesn't matter. But if you have any questions, you can message me, and I'll try and do what I can. Okay. This is that dark green color again. Now I mix up, most of the time, I mix up most of my dyes ahead of time so that they're in a liquid form. I don't want to say I never apply directly with the powdered dyes because sometimes I do. Sometimes as a final layer, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of speckle on the end. But in general, that's not the way I do it. I find that the actual yarn itself, after it's either knitted up or crocheted up or whatever it is that you're doing with the project, I find if you are using the liquid, it makes everything disperse a little bit more evenly. All right, let me go ahead and put this one again. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to adjust where I have this zip tie, maybe like a quarter of the way down or something like that, and kind of plop everything back up in here. And I kind of pull the, see, after this top part is all of the light green is kind of on this top one, the top part, and then it kind of seeps down underneath. So even on the underneath, you're going to see little bits of the green here and there. So I'm just kind of adjusting that and putting that, you know, that kind of the green that we already have, kind of putting that towards the bottom so that there's some open bare yarn at the top that's ready to accept this new color, which is a very, very dark green. But one of the cool things about this green is that after it kind of hits the heat and hits the acid, sometimes it kind of breaks out into, it kind of adds a little bit of brown. You can see over here, this brown right here and right here, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, depending on what you're going for. For this particular colorway, it adds quite a bit to me. Kind of like a twofer. Yeah, a couple different colors out of one. All right. And like I said, I'm going to let that sit about 15 minutes. And then I'll come back in and do that final layer of that kind of, it's kind of a buttery yellow, I would say. This one is going to need that yellow, and this one is also going to need that yellow. Yeah, Carrie, that color that I use, it has something to do with the chemical reaction. I'm not really sure, but that comes straight up from that dark green color, which I think is so cool. I mean, also depending on how hot it is, depending on the, you know, there's whole sort of dependencies on just about everything. But I do find pretty regularly that when I use that dark green, there's those little bits of brown that kind of pop out, which I think is really neat. All right, I'm gonna put my butt back up in here. All right, now I'm going to show you the yarn that we just made. This is called, it's called, Lord, I should see it. It's called Meadow. And let's see if I can get this lighting a little bit better. You can see that kind of, that dark brown, or the brownish colors that are in here. And then you can see little bits of the darker green. And then kind of the little bits of the yellow. And then kind of all of them together. You know, they kind of mix together. They sit on there separately and then they mix together. So I don't know. I love it. It's not really showing up on camera as pretty as it actually is. I know, right, Amy? You know, I'm very, I was a nurse. All of my training is like science-based, right? And I like my recipes. I like to be able to say, okay, if I use 60 mLs of this, it's going to give me a certain amount of color and da 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 da. But there's always kind of that unknown when you're dealing with this. Sometimes things just happen. You're not really sure why, and it's kind of hard to reproduce. but this is one of those that I've been able to reproduce. All right, I'm going to show you a sock that I've knitted with this, and I might be able to explain it a little bit better with, this left and right thing. This is challenging for me. Okay. All right. See how you can see the bits of darker green, but you can see the bits of darker green kind of throughout the whole thing. And you can see little bits of yellow kind of throughout the whole thing, and little bits of that kind of light green and the kind of sagey green. You can kind of see them all throughout, so that, both of your socks are going to look pretty similar. We are sunny today and this light is not working, but I think y'all know what I'm talking about. So that is, and again, I am one person in a huge variety of dyers with different techniques and different ways of doing things. So this certainly is not the only way to do it, but this is the way I do it with the variegated. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Carrie and Amy. And Dana. Yeah, it's a beautiful yarn, and I love the way it knits up. I have I love hand knitting, but I also like to show samples of all of the different yarn that I sell so that you can see how it works up, because kind of my philosophy is I want the yarn to look as beautiful worked up in your project as it does on the skein. Because, don't get me wrong, the skein is beautiful and you can sit it on your shelf and, look at it every once in a while and think, oh, it's beautiful. But I want you to be able to use it. That's why I choose the bases that I do. They're very, I don't want to say utilitarian because that doesn't sound right at all, because they're soft and squishy and lovely. But I get the superwash merino so that you can wash them. I toss all my stuff in the wash. And the nylon in there helps with the strength, so you're not going to wear through them as easily. But that's why I choose those bases, because I want my yarn to be used. And once you use it and you make your project, I want you to wear it and I want you to use it. So that's why I do that. All right, guys. I think I'm going to go ahead and head out if you don't have any more questions. I don't think I've missed anything. If I did, I'm so sorry. No, I think we're good. Yeah. I find, and I do have some, I have a website, it's Good Noodle Yarn Co., which is where all of my things are and where you can go to the yarn club and all of that stuff. But I also have an Etsy shop, which I started with like back in the day, and I still have it going. And I have some of my my one-of-a-kind yarns on there. And the only reason why I mention this is because they are absolutely gorgeous in the skein. Like blotches of color here and here, and they're absolutely gorgeous. I don't find that they knit up as well, but that's my taste and that's what I want, in my yarn, and people could have different, different ways. Sometimes there's people that they make these socks and they've got like this, like, it's almost like lightning that's going through it. It's really cool looking, and that's a look and that's a thing, and that's just not what I'm going for with my yarn. But anyway, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. I'm planning on doing this every Wednesday morning. And if you like this kind of, different layered and different kind of the different stages of the yarn, then, let me know in the comments. Hop on over to Facebook and let me know. And I'll go ahead and keep on doing the same thing. We'll just do a different color next week. If there's a color in particular that you'd like to see or a question that you'd like to have answered, you can certainly leave that in our Facebook group, or you can DM me individually. Either or. All right. Again, I'm Kathleen from Good Noodle Yarn Co. And thank you so much for coming and hanging out for this morning. And I will see you in the groups, and I will see you next week. Bye.